This video is part of a full podcast, link in the description for the full podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Enjoy the video.
We'll start with Arsenal. And how has the season started for the Gunners so far?
I think it's been an interesting one, I think we've got 10 or... Wait, how many... 13 points from possible 15, is it?
I'm going to...
Well, I mean, we haven't lost a game so far. It's been 5 games. It's just depending on how good my math is. So.
Yeah, 13. That's correct.
But, yeah, I think considering it's been a really positive start in terms of results, it's been interesting. The talk about Arsenal has been they've not started off at their best, but I think a lot of that talk has been a consequence of an increase of expectations. If we beat Spurs on Sunday or Monday for me, that will be a better start to the season than last season for us. Even though we were fantastic at the start of last season and we were all very excited about it, but I think we have been good, and I think the claims about us being not as fluid as we were last season is probably more just about how teams are setting up against us now. They're not giving us any space, and I think if either of you managed to see the Arsenal PSV game the other day, where they actually did give us a bit of space and they tried to press us, you saw Arsenal actually be very fluid for the first time this season. I think it's more of a result of just the space and the time they were given. So to be honest, I'm really happy with how we started the season, and especially how Declan Rice just came into the team and just looked fantastic and just completely. He looks like he could have been there for 2 or 3 years. He's came into a position that Thomas Partey has played for the last few seasons, and it probably took Partey about a year or so to actually acclimatise to playing the number 6 role by himself. And Rice just came in and after 3 games looks even better. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the start of the season, really.
Fair enough. And then we'll move on to having a look at this goalkeeping situation. Now, it's the media are dubbing this as a mess, it's fair to say. People can't get over the fact that Arteta has 2 top goalkeepers, and by the looks of it, what's happening to Leno when he decided to replace him with Ramsdale seems to be happening again to Ramsdale when he's trying to replace him with David Raya. What are your sort of thoughts on this situation? How do you think Arteta's managing it? Who do you think is the better goalkeeper? And is he doing the right thing?
I mean, it's a really interesting one, right? And I think the reason it's been talked about so much is just because it's just so out of character in football, or maybe not out of character, but it's just unusual. You very rarely see it with 2 very good goalkeepers. Aaron Ramsdale was he was a part of the shortlist for the Yashin Trophy. It's the top 10 goalkeepers in the world for the last season, and that's probably about right. He has been very good, and he was a big part of why we were where we were last season. He made a lot of big contributions. But David Raya is a goalkeeper that Arsenal have tracked for a number of years. Even before we signed Ramsdale, he was our number 1 choice. Actually going back as far as the 2021 season, where we had a dreadful season and people were taking the piss about getting relegated and talking about how Leicester were going to be taking over in the top 6 or whatever, and it was a painful time. Yeah. How times have changed, yeah.
Yeah.
But where was I?
But before making slide picks at the
yes.
Yes.
So we've been interested in him in a long time, and the connection there, if you're not sure, is Inaki Kenya, our goalkeeping coach, has a really close relationship with David Raya. Has worked with him at Brentford before, and was the one that brought him into Brentford from Blackburn. And yeah, I think he's a really good goalkeeper, and of course Ramsdale is as well. So I think every pundit and their dad has had their 6th sense on the situation. Because it's Arsenal and because it's a big club, a similar thing is happening actually at Brighton with Steele and their new goalkeeper, who I'm not going to try and bother pronouncing his name.
Verbruggen.
But Verbruggen, yeah, sorry, it's more that I just forgot his name really, but it's not actually that difficult to pronounce. But I think it's a big topic because of who we are as a club, and I think it's being somewhat overstated that David Reyes came in and played 2 games, because I mean Ramsdale started the first 4 games of the season, and now Reyes played 2, and since then everyone seems to be losing their marbles, saying that David Reyes has already replaced Ramsdale, and I think it's a bit early to say that. If Raya plays 8-9 games on the bounce and Ramsdale doesn't get a look in, then maybe there's something to it, but I think it's a bit early to make that claim. And I think overall, as much as it is quite a hard thing for some Arsenal fans to take, because he's a fan favourite, Aaron Ramsdale, it's going to benefit the team overall. Whoever comes out, if someone is going to come out on top per se, it's surely only going to benefit the team and the level we're playing at.
Absolutely. And I do want to actually ask you on what Arteta said in the press conference, and I'd like to bring Spurs News in on this one as well. In terms of how Arteta has actually decided to come out and say that he'd be interested in substituting goalkeepers within games, and he's seen towards the final 5 or 10 minutes of a game he would like to make a goalkeeping substitution. I'll go to Spurs News first, and then we'll go back to you, Liam. Do you think that is actually something that could become normalised in football?
I'm really not too sure, to be honest, because, again, it's traditionally always been you've had your main first-team keeper and then your other keeper's on the bench if anyone gets injured, and that's pretty much it. So substituting a keeper in the game is, unless they're having an absolute rotter of a game, is that really going to make much of a difference to the momentum? I'm not too sure. For example, at Spurs, if you brought on Forster instead of Vicario, is that going to change the game up and win you the game? I highly doubt it. So, not really too sure what he's saying there.
And then, Liam, what do you make of Arteta's sort of ideas around substituting goalkeepers in the middle of games? Do you think it's something he'll actually do?
Well, it's interesting because any Arsenal fan who listens to Arteta's press conferences regularly knows he is prone to saying something that you just think he's absolutely lying. He says some things that you really do think he's waffling.
He's lost it.
But to be honest, I think I see where he's coming from in terms of I think it's a situation where Arteta is really trying to get the upper hand on everyone else more. He wants to have that just slight advantage that another team doesn't have. It's fair to say that there's no other team in the league that has 2 good goalkeepers like that. Maybe Man City actually, with Ortega as well. He's quite good, but
yes.
It's pretty rare, and I do think he's probably being genuine about how he said he's wanted to substitute a keeper before and hasn't had the guts to, because it's obviously something that no one really does.
No.
And I think to be the first one to do it will be the most difficult, and it may. I think if Arteta was to do that and it wasn't going to work, that would be the thing that he'd be remembered for. But I don't think it's something that, I wouldn't rule it out for the future of football at all. The way that football's going, and Arteta talks about finishers all the time, about the substitutes. He describes them as finishers. They come on and impact the game. And I think goalkeepers could be that too.
I'm interested to see where it goes, and I mean, the other side to this is obviously if Ramsdale does take over, if Ray does take over that sort of starting berth, or even if he doesn't, could you still see Ramsdale sort of moving on, with now him having to share that first position? Obviously Ray won't be the one to move on, with him obviously just being brought in. I know it's on a loan with an option to buy, but I think both parties realise that will be done permanently. Could you see Ramsdale moving on permanently, and if so, to where?
I think he is quite settled in North London, and I think it would take a lot for him to actually leave. I think he'd have to really be dislodged for him to go. As in where he could go, I think obviously it's quite murky for a certain level of player, and an English player sometimes when they want to leave now, because the money is in the Premier League. But someone like Ramsdale, I think ideally he would not want to have to move to an Arsenal rival in obviously not Tottenham or anything, but like Chelsea or Man United, or whoever needs a goalkeeper. But I think he's been linked with Bayern in recent weeks, And I think that would make a lot of sense, really, because, I mean, they were going for Raya themselves until they realised they wanted to spend their money on Palhinha, which obviously didn't work out.
No.
And, yeah, I think he would make a lot of sense for them, and obviously there'd be a great move for him. And, I mean, hopefully it doesn't come to that situation, because I do love him, and I would like him to stay.
Yeah, and I mean, I've also seen his ability to rile up opposition fan bases after some of the things he did against us a few years ago. I still remember our famous chant when goalkeeper, well, every club does it. A goalkeeper kicks a ball and the fans go, "You're a very bad player." Is the child-friendly way to put it. And I still remember him turning around and sort of fist pumping the fans on the after he made that blinding save versus James Maddison on the free kick, which I still never forgive him for. God, that was an excellent save. And then we'll move from the bottom of the pitch to the top of the pitch for the final question on Arsenal before we do move to the other side of North London, and that's the striker position. Do you think Arsenal do need to actually go out and get a top striker, sort of take them to the next level to be able to challenge for Champions Leagues and Premier League titles? Because we saw how close they came last year. But Jesus, while he's a good player, could they step that up a level maybe?
It's interesting because obviously Jesus is top, and I think especially since watching that game against PSV the other day, he really showed his class for the first start he's had in months. He's a really good player. I think one of the best in the league. Really, he's top. But I think because of who we're competing with in the league and the type of striker they have, it is far more appealing for most fans to have that big traditional number 9 who scores a load of goals. But I think it's key to remember the reason we scored so many goals last season was because of the way we set up and because of Gabriel Jesus, the way we shared around our goals. So many players, I think we had 4 or 5 players above 10 goals in the league. So I think it's something we could add to our Arsenal. It's good. It's a good one. But
tell us that in the morning, can't you?
Yeah. But someone like Ivan Toney, I think would be great. Obviously Evan Ferguson's a top player. But he's probably going to be. I can't imagine the price that Brighton are going to be putting up for him, considering the money they've put up for a lot of players.
They laughed at 50 million from United, so you'd imagine they're putting 120, 140, 160.
Yeah, I'd imagine 120 or more, and I mean I actually don't blame him. He's younger than me, and scoring hat-tricks in the Premier League, so
he's a bit mad, isn't he?
Yeah, he looks unreal. But I think I do think it will probably be something in Arteta's mind, especially because I think, of course, Eddie Nketiah, he's a very good striker, but I don't think he's probably at the level of I think there's quite a big drop off between him and Jesus. So yeah, I think it would be something we'd be considering, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I don't think it's a necessary addition to the team necessarily. I don't think it would push us leaps and bounds.
Okay,
if you know what I mean.
Okay, there we go. There is the red side of North London covered.